Today I'm shooting from my living room because my children are at school, and I was doing a little photo shoot in here. I'd set up a studio to take some pictures of our product line for our website, and I had some lights in here and a tripod, and I thought, you know what, no one's around, I'm going to shoot in my living room so you don't get to or have to look at my dingy office anymore. So hopefully this isn't too echoey. If it's too echoey, I massively apologize. Today I wanted to speak about owning multiple salons, because owning multiple salons is something that now we have been doing for about 12 years. We grew our business. I've talked about this before. My wife and I started our business. We were both busy hairdressers. We hired an assistant, taught them to do hair, gave them a chair, hired another assistant, taught that person how to do hair, gave them a chair. Then we needed two assistants, hired those two assistants, taught them, and we just basically grew our business from the two of us to, I think at our peak we were around 53 people. From 2 to 53 people, and we grew it completely organically without it really being any kind of a conscious effort. And people very often talk to me about, they ask me how I did things, and they speak to me like I've done something really, really special. And understand, any kind of success or growth that I've had, and I should say we've had as a company, has been for a couple of really, really basic reasons. And one of them is, I don't really know that much about business. I know people and I know how to be a successful hairdresser, but I don't really know much about business other than I've had a couple of good ideas. I've had a lot of bad ideas too. We've wasted a lot of money and resources in things that didn't work out, or things that I wasn't willing to push through. But the one thing I do know is how to be a successful hairdresser and how to teach other people how to be successful. So I've always maintained that if I could just teach enough people to be really successful, and hopefully they would stay working for me, then we could grow our business into something kind of special. And that's really all I know about the hairdressing business. I don't know much about numbers. I feel a little bit embarrassed. When I talk to people who really, really understand their numbers, I've never really paid attention to them, because other than the first couple of years, once we grew our business to a certain point, I never really had to worry that much about numbers, because there was always money in the bank. We'd pay our bills and there'd always be money in the bank, except for once, and maybe I'll briefly touch on this. I'll tell you a story actually. When we opened our third salon location, it was a salon location called Space, and we were booming in our other locations. I was a little arrogant, and we'd sort of blown up, and things are going really, really good, and I decided I wanted to open another location. And then I'll just tell you about me. I get off on designing and building hair salons. I don't love running them, but I love designing and building them. And actually, our company, we've had 8 different salons over the years. Even though we currently only have, I think, 4 locations, we've had 8 different locations over the years, maybe 9. I love building hair salons. So if you ever want to hire me to build your hair salon and get it going for you, I'm happy to do that, but I don't want to run it. Anyways, so I found like a dream location, and we had the money in the bank to build what at least I thought we had enough money in the bank to build it. And it was the first one that I had ever hired a contractor for. Normally we just contracted ourselves. We hire all the trades and do it all ourselves. And so this one I hired a contractor on, and I knew it was going way over budget. And it had spun so far out of control. This is about 5 years ago. It had spun so far out of control that I stopped logging into my online banking. I had to. And it was about 6 weeks before the salon opened, and I just stopped looking at my bank account, because I just knew that it was going to be so bad that there was no point in me having an extra 6 weeks of sleepless nights. I'd be better off just ignoring it. I was already in too deep. I'd already committed. And there was just no point in me being aware at this point, because things were so bad. Anyways, I think it was like 2 days before we opened, I finally logged into my online banking, and I had $6,000 in our business account. To put that in perspective, our monthly Visa bill is about $40,000, and our rent is about $35,000 a month. Our payroll for the company was in the neighborhood of about $130,000 a month, and we had $6,000 in the bank. So I phoned our general manager, and I like, as soon as I saw it, it was way worse than I thought it was going to be. And I phoned her, and I said, okay, we have to have a staff meeting. I'm closing a location. We had another really, really nice salon called Tao, which I regret that one went down. But Tao had no lease left on it. We were just going month to month, and we would have still been there. I mean, the landlord doesn't really care about having leases. Once you fulfill the original lease, you just go month to month. And I've been in one location for, I think, 12 years without a lease. And so I knew I could get out of it. And this is something that I've always done as a salon owner. I take a lot of risk, and people think that I'm this really courageous person, but all my risk is calculated, in that I do these big projects, but I also always know that I've got an out somewhere else. And I knew that if things got bad, I could at least walk away from this Tao location and free up a fair amount of cash. So I phoned the manager. I said, we're having a staff meeting, and just between you and me, we're closing Tao. We're going to close it in 2 weeks. And so I went over, had a staff meeting, and said, I'm really sorry, guys. I need you all to move over to space. We have to close Tao. We're broke. And we, I worked my butt off. And within a few months, we were actually, back in a situation financially where things were going okay again. My business was profitable, and because of that, I was able to dip into our bank account quite a bit, but we were able to recover from it. So it was an interesting thing. I was probably more terrified, or as terrified at that moment, than I ever had been in our company, and it took me right back to when we first opened. And I remember I bounced a paycheck once, and I felt so sick that I had bounced this person's $1,500 paycheck. That's how broke we were. And it took me right back to that point where we were scrambling for a few $100s and fighting through that. So anyways, it's all about scale. It's, you tackle these things, and you still, that panic never goes away. It's kind of a thrill. Like, as long as you know you're going to survive, it's kind of a thrill. It's kind of neat to know that you can dig deep and overcome these things. Anyways, so multiple salon ownership. I've been doing it for 12 years now, and we just downsized for the very first time. It's the first time we've stopped growing, and I want people to understand what it's like to owning multiple salons, because when you have one salon and you're in there and you're a working stylist, and that's usually what happens, right? The owner of the salon is a stylist, and you're in there and you're generally the top earner in that location, and things are going really, really well, and maybe you're even open 7 days a week. Maybe you're running 2 shifts. You've got a 10-chair salon, and maybe you've got 18 stylists working out of it, and you're doing everything right, and then the next logical thing is to open another location. Understand that when you open a second location, things change. Things change massively. And I was warned about this many, many years ago by a very famous hairdresser and salon owner who actually was saying to me, Michael, like, I know how well you're going to do. You're going to do okay. You'll take care of your family, but you'll never be able to open a second location or multiple locations. Now, this dude has 5. You'll never be able to do multiple locations unless you have somebody that you implicitly trust in that location every single day. If you don't, you won't be able to do it. And for me, I was kind of like, yeah, well, screw you. I can do whatever. Because that's the way we are when we get told not to do things, when we're not receptive to the advice. If I ask for advice, I'm receptive. If I didn't ask, I'm probably not receptive. And that's why I actually try really hard to not give advice to people unless they ask for it. Because most people don't want to hear it. And even if it's a reality, they still don't want to hear it. So, it was an interesting thing. When we had our first sort of foray into 2 locations, things were booming. I was working at one and my wife was working at the other, and the salons were packed and it was booming. And we had put the systems in place. Like, we had manuals and we had job descriptions and all of these things, and there was a path, and we'd been at it for a little while. So it wasn't sort of the Wild West in my salons. But I think what I did was I took for granted how tight my wife's ownership of that location was, and the fact that even if we didn't have manuals and all those things, I think it still would have been in perfect hands, because she was capable of taking care of it, because she ruled with an iron fist, and people just kind of did what she asked them to do. She was, she's a tough cookie, and she's fair, and everybody loves her, but nobody was slacking. It was it was an amazing thing. And I think I took a degree of that for granted, so that when she went off on maternity leave and we had to leave the city, because you can't afford to live in Vancouver, and people always are surprised, but I have to live 45 minutes outside of Vancouver, even though all of our businesses are in Vancouver, just in order to be able to afford a house. It's expensive out here. And as soon as that took me away from being in the salons and being close, like within 10 minutes of the salons, things started to change. But we were still really booming, and I had all these other things going on, and we were growing our school business. So I kind of was letting things slip a little bit. And I think I was just sort of turning a blind eye. But things were up here, and they were just slowly declining. But because my focus was on other things, I was kind of like, who cares? We're doing so well. And now I'm growing this school business, which is taking up a lot of my energy. I'm not that concerned, and I'll get back on track with that location or with my salon locations once I've got my school in place. And I gotta tell you, for a little while things were okay, but the longer I kind of left it, the worse things got. And I remember a client said this to me years and years and years ago, that the only way a business runs itself is into the ground. And for me, I think I was letting my ego get in the way. And I don't want to say ego as I'm walking around like I'm some kind of arrogant asshole, but I'm talking about my pride, like the good kind of parts of your ego, but the things that maybe stop you from necessarily making the best decisions, the best fiscal decisions, or the most responsible decisions. And I was letting my ego kind of drive what we were doing, as opposed to, my work ethic wasn't necessarily there. I consider myself an extremely lazy person, and people say, well, how can you be lazy? You've done all these things and you're in the salon all the time. And it's like, well, those are things that I want to be doing. So therefore it's not really work. If you love what you do, it's not work. It's the hard shit, the stuff that I didn't want to do, which is the stuff that's not fun, which is running the business part of it. That wasn't as fun for me. What's fun for me is just, doing the fun stuff. So I didn't really want to dig deep into the stuff that wasn't that fun, and the things that weren't fun, that's the stuff that really, really needed to get done. And things started to slip. And it was a really, really tough pill to swallow. And as the business started to decline a little bit in our salon company, and also I've talked about this before, that I believe salons have a life cycle, that I think that we had peaked, and that salon, unless we had done some really, really strong things system-wise to maintain things and really injected new life into that business on a regular basis, I think all businesses succumb to a life cycle, particularly as they grow and the owner maybe steps away. Because I know for me, when I'm behind the chair, I'm the driving force of the salon. I tend to be generally you as the owner are the busiest person in the room, and when you step away from that, the dynamic in the room absolutely changes and the energy changes. And so you've got to work extremely hard to keep that going. So I think the point of what I'm trying to say is, when you get to the point that you're debating doing multiple locations, understand that things are going to change. And unless you've put the policies in place, and unless your one location was booming without you standing behind the chair, meaning the systems are all in place for you to open that second location, that you can copy that blueprint. Really, it's a franchise model. You basically create the concept of a franchise and you put everything on paper and make it happen. You need to do this, but the thing that you have to understand is we're in the hair business, and the hair business is the people business. So no matter what you put on paper, there's always going to be a degree of variables, because you're dealing with people, whether they're emotional. Like just yesterday alone, I think I had 3 people call in sick. We had one person who'd been with me for 7 years last week quit very unexpectedly. It's a good thing. We're thrilled. Couldn't be happier. But there's never a minute. Just when you think things are happening, all of a sudden, like the rug can be pulled out from under you. And when you expose yourself with multiple locations, the rug is much bigger. And actually, I just got an email today from somebody who carries our product line, and he's just lost half of his staff in a matter of a week. Like he was booming, 8 people, everything's going well. He's like, holy smokes, things are going great. And then literally a week and a half later, it's like, holy shit, we have to reinvent. We've now down to 4 people or 3 people, and we've just had to hire more people. It's a crazy, crazy business. So no matter how hard you work, it's incredibly difficult to maintain, to maintain that momentum that maybe you had when you had that one booming location. It's hard to maintain that into two. So when you see these companies, and every city has one of these companies that has been around forever and is booming and has multiple locations, you need to seriously acknowledge what they've done is extraordinary. And these guys have earned it, and they've worked extremely hard to get there, and they've done the things that nobody else is capable of doing. Well, we're all capable, but they've done the things that nobody else is willing to do. They've put in that groundwork, and they've finally, put in enough work that their entity sort of becomes a bit self-sustaining. Not that it doesn't need to be run like an extremely tight ship, but they've almost surpassed the point of life cycle, and now they've become kind of iconic. And there's a couple of these companies like Ciavello in Toronto and Suki's in Vancouver, and I often talk about Van Michael Salons in Atlanta and Florida and Tokyo, and some of these companies. Chromians, I think he probably has his ups and downs, but he's got a pretty cool brand. To do what these guys do with multiple locations, it's an absolutely extraordinary thing. And these guys have worked their butts off to get to where they were, because every one of these people at one point was running a 1 or 2 or 3 chair salon, and they all came to that from that point. So all those owners have walked in your shoes. I actually wrote a little thing about some of these people in one of my blogs once, and somebody had written me a email and kind of trying to downplay what some of these people have done, and saying, oh, well, they're in bed with a product company. It's like, well, the product company didn't just decide to get in bed with these people and finance them and do these things. These people earned it. For me, I have companies that are constantly trying to get my attention. They weren't trying to get my attention to this degree when I was a 2-chair salon. I had to get to the point that these guys cared enough about my business. I mean, it's a really cool thing to be in a position where companies are making you great offers, but understand, that's not some unfair advantage that these people have over you. These people have worked their asses off to get to the point that the companies come to them. So I don't really have a whole lot of advice as far as running multiple salons, other than give it a serious second thought. If you're profitable and you're running a good business and things are going really, really well, and you're debating kind of doing that second salon location, understand that that's very often the make or break for a lot of people. And just look around you and see how many people have successfully done it. It's not that many, especially when they're independent. I mean, in the franchise model, you tend to see more, but that's a different story. But when you see the independents that have done this and have run it well and have lasted, think about it and think, okay, are you prepared to be that guy? Are you prepared to that's going to be your life as a business owner? I look at Van, who, he's now at a point that I think he rides his bike as often as he wants, but, Ray Ciavello works his butt off. He still works his butt off. The guys at Suki's, they don't stop. They never stop. And for me, I'm way too lazy to be at that stage. I just am not interested in doing it. I think I used to think I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to be that guy, but I didn't want to put in the work. And so you have to look at yourself and examine if you're actually going to be capable of putting in the work. Because if you're not putting in the work, you're going to be opening yourself up to some potentially awful financial situations that, it could ruin you. So sometimes, if things are going well, keep growing, doing great things, but that second location, things change. So give it some serious thought before you're going to go there. Thanks so much. Have a great day. I'm just a boy with a new haircut, and that's a pretty nice haircut. Charge it like a puzzle.